99 Jamaica. Don't wanna leave, we'll stay tuned. Bridge 99 Jamaica.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica belong. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, the people demand. Right to life and security. Oh, what a job. Oh, what a peace. How great this country could be. Respecting your rights, respecting human rights. What a wonderful day.
Happy Tuesday and welcome to another episode of Let's Start Justice, the show of Jamaicans for Justice, a human rights organization that has been around since 1999. Now, again, as is customary, we just want to say thank you to our listeners for continuing to join us. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ.
And I'm Jade Williams, the Policy and Advocacy Specialist at JFJ.
Now, just reminding those who are joining us via Radio Land on the Bridge 99 website as well as on JFJ's YouTube platform that you can call into the program at 676-4996 or you can WhatsApp your views to us at 239-7583. And again, if you're on YouTube, you can also share your comments there or on our social media page. Now, the topic that we're going to be discussing today is around mandatory minimum sentencing and the government's proposal of a 20-year mandatory minimum for minors, those specifically between the ages of 14 and under 18. So we're going to be joined later on by a UNICEF representative, Ms. Charlene Desai, who is the child protection specialist at UNICEF, as well as Kenneth Churchill Nita, who is an attorney at law. Before we get into the program, again, we normally do our human rights recap. The main thing that happened last week, Jade, I think is the topic for discussion.
Yes, it is. The Joint Select Committee would have begun taking presentations on the proposed amendments that we are about to discuss today. So we would have heard some varying views on what is proposed and whether or not it will be a detriment or a service.
All right. But one thing I want to touch on that happened last week,
Yes.
we had the primary exit profile, the PEP exam. Some of us are a little bit older. We did common entrance. So,
Ma'am, GSAT, not
you're
quite
a
that
GSAT.
old. Not quite that old.
I'm a pro 30-something, but it's fine. But I just want to say congratulations to our youngsters who did the exam, and I just want to remind parents that the journey is just starting. I know the PEP period is a very pressuring one for the parents and those who played a particular role in their children's development. Kudos to you. But one of the caution as a parent as well, we tend to support our children during the exam period and not recognizing that the journey, requires us to be a little bit more involved leading up to. So the homework assistance, for me, I don't understand half of what my child is doing. So I'm just there ensuring that I point to a particular paragraph on the page and so on. But parenting requires much more than that dragon type oversight, stressing the children out and so on.
Absolutely.
So the journey has just started. So I just want to say congratulations to the children. You may not have gotten your top 3 school, but the journey continues. Yes. And please do your best as you enter big people school time now, high school level. So again, congrats to our youngsters. Before I turn over to you, Jade, another thing I wanted to point out to listeners, the Constitutional Reform Committee continues to meet, and we're seeing them doing town halls across the country. We continue to remind the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs that the town halls require a little bit more publicity for lack of a better word, a little bit more public engagement so that people know that you're coming in, the little tone criers and so on. But to the public, you have a role, you have a duty to pay attention to what is happening. Read up a little bit more. The things are online. Pay attention to your different non-profit organizations and so on, and read the newspaper, watch the news, listen to the different radio programs. On Bridge 99, you have, for example, your former Prime Minister Bruce Golding, very good program. You also have Reverend Ronnie Waits on Bridge 99, and of course, I won't mention the competitors of Bridge, but let me say, just watch the news, pay attention, and be informed. You have a role, you have a duty, because it's our constitution, it's free business, and the road to republic requires us to all, know what is happening and have a say.
You're here talking about one of the tenets of human rights, participatory and inclusionary. Right?
Absolutely. And again, a free business, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, over to you, Jane.
All right, so our right of the day today comes from the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and it comes from Article 3 of that convention. So it states there that all actions concerning children must be taken with the primary consideration being the best interest of the child, and state parties are to undertake to ensure that the child has such protection and care as is necessary for their well-being, and take into account the rights and duties of their parents, legal guardians, and other individuals who are responsible to ensure this end, right? So it is giving the states an obligation when they are making decisions that relate to children to take into account as the primary consideration the best interest of the child. So I think that's poignant for today. And our trivia question for today is, when did Jamaica become a signatory to that convention on the rights of the child? So if you want to participate in that, you can send us a WhatsApp at 2397583, or you can send us an Instagram message at JA for Justice on Instagram.
All right, perfect. For those who are watching on YouTube would recognize that I have my paper very close because I'm visually impaired. But in the spirit of moving on, now we would have heard the Minister of Justice, the Honorable Delroy Chuck, among other public officials, bemoaning, and understandably so, the high crime rate. There are so many shocking things that really you're listening in the news and you're saying what is happening with Jamaica land we love. So we understand that there is public pressure towards really grappling with the crime rate and putting forward proposals. So a few weeks ago, the Minister of Justice would have tabled some proposed amendments around 3 pieces of legislation. One of them is the Offences Against the Persons Act, which will see mandatory minimums for adults increasing to some, I think, 45 years and 50 years, so capital versus non-capital murder, and so on, just off the top of my head. But what is of concern to JFJ and other civil society organization is the proposed amendment to the Child Care and Protection Act, wherein we will see the implementation of a high mandatory minimum of 20 years for juvenile offenders ages 14 and up. And several critics, again including JFJ, we have highlighted the detrimental effect that these changes may have on judicial discretion, as the sentences do prevent the judges from considering the unique circumstances of each offender, as well as the general child care and protection framework, keeping in mind that we're a signatory to the conventions of the rights of the child. And you would have heard Jay talking about the best interest of the child. So that's something that we're going to be looking at. How do you balance best interest of the child, public safety, as well as the harm that would have been done to victims?
Yes, so one of the poignant recommendations was to prohibit the application of these sentences to children altogether, which is in line with the recommendation that JFJ would have made as well. But barring that, a middle ground was suggested by JAMBAR, the Jamaica Bar Association, to apply to repeat offenders.
So the Bar Association suggests that in terms of a policy directive, especially for children and youth, that the intended mandatory minimum sentences be limited to repeat offenders only if implemented at all. The JBA maintains, however, that it should not be implemented at all. And I hear Madam DPP speak about what goes into a trial judge's determination of our appropriate sentence and the different factors that are taken into account. And it seems to me, at the end of the day, where we all seem to be saying the same thing.
That was President of the Jamaica Bar Association, Alexander Williams. He was speaking before the Joint Select Committee at a sitting of the House last week. Now, following that, it was the Director of Public Prosecutor, Paula Llewellyn, who also cautioned that there needs to be some balance between the objectives of sentencing, pointing out that some of the most heinous crimes are committed by juvenile perpetrators. I think she used the word vile acts when she was making her presentation. Now, the recommendation, in her estimation, ought to be reserved where mandatory minimum sentences are given for offenders, minors rather, who commit capital murders, and then leave the discretion of the judges in all other circumstances. Here's a clip from the DPP.
The mandatory minimum in respect of 20 years be left for children who have committed murder in the course or furtherance of one of the categories, which would make them eligible to be tried for capital murder. We would suggest, to meet the concerns just expressed, and maybe for some of the legislatures, that all other types of murders, the judge be left with the discretion, depending on the circumstances, depending on their antecedents, depending on what the child psychologist says, and depending on everything, to impose a sentence as they deem appropriate.
As another critique coming out of Jambar's presentation was that the proposals may fall out of line with what are the general objectives of the Child Care and Protection Act and hinder the rehabilitation of those who may be most suitable to those measures.
In relation to one particular bit of legislation, it is actually called the Child Care and Protection Act. That's what the act is called. That in itself speaks to the policy directive, and I don't mind saying our treaty requirements, that we must treat children specially and carefully. So we have to be very, very cautious when we get into the area of mandatory minimum sentences for children whose growth, mental growth, may be not up to the particular standard to accept the nature and consequences of their acts.
Now, again, that was Mr. Williams of Jambar. Another critical point that Mr. Williams made, and we're going to be having that discussion, is that the proposed mandatory minimum sentence runs counter to the provisions of the Child Care and Protection Act when you look at what the act is called. So we're going to be joined by Mrs. Charlene Cordesai, who is the Child Protection Specialist with UNICEF Jamaica, as well as Mr. Kenneth Churchill Neto, who is an attorney at law. Do we have both guests on?
Hi, good afternoon, Michael and Jade. This is Charlene from UNICEF.
Hi, Charlene. Thank you so much. All right, let us just start with what exactly is UNICEF's concern with the proposals coming from the government of Jamaica?
Okay, well, thanks again for having us on to share our views on this issue. As you know, UNICEF is deeply concerned by this proposed amendments to the Child Care and Protection Act, which would require children convicted of murder to serve this mandatory 20-year sentence before becoming eligible for parole. And really, we have a number of concerns, but just to sum them up, the first is that it's contrary to our obligations, Jamaica's obligations under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, as you've been talking about, and the best interest of the child. I was watching a little bit before coming on.
Yes.
But also, I think ultimately we see from the international evidence and research into this area that it will not, in fact, contribute to public safety in the way that we want to. I mean, at UNICEF, of course, we're also very concerned, as you mentioned, at the extremely high rates of crime and violence in our country. We are definitely not out of touch with that. We work every day with children who have been exposed to violence, abuse, neglect, exploitation. So we know this is a serious issue. And of course, we're all looking for solutions to this terrible, wicked problem that's affecting Jamaica. But we don't feel that these harsh punishments and mandatory minimum sentencing is the right way to go in terms of dealing and addressing some of the issues of crime and violence.
Okay, Charlene, I'm
yes.
going to ask you to pause for a second. We're going to take a
Sure.
quick break, and when we come back, you can elaborate more on why you think that won't work.
If you're in business, get on the bridge. 876-669-5000. If you're in business, get on the bridge. 876-669-5000. If you're in business, get on the bridge. 876-669-5000. Call now.
Over 14,000 Jamaicans are living with HIV and not yet on treatment. We want you to know you can live a normal life with HIV. Now is the time to get on treatment. Now is the time to start taking your medication on time, every time. Now is the time for your HIV status to become undetectable. Come to Jamaica AIDS Support for Life. We will help you to reach viral suppression. Now is the time to achieve all your goals and live a long and healthy life. To get on treatment, contact Jamaica AIDS Support for Life at 876-925-0021. A message from Jamaica AIDS Support for Life and the kind support of USAID from the American people.
Last year, Reggae Sumfest was on fire as a host of top-flight Jamaican artists turned out for an unforgettable musical tribute to iconic dancehall producer and prolific hitmaker Dave Kelly. This year, it will be magnificent as leading Jamaican entertainers across generations will come together to honor one of the most influential figures in modern popular music, producer and sound system operator extraordinaire, Lloyd James, the man we have come to know as King Jammy. Yes, it's tribute to the King. Reggae Sumfest 2023, Catherine Hall, Montego Bay, Jamaica, July 16 to 22. You can't miss this. Sponsored by H&L Rapid True Value Flow, Iberia Star, JTV, Secrets, Red Stripe, Grace, Magnum, TVJ, and H&L Agro.
King James, play sweeter, stronger, better. Don't wanna leave, don't wanna go. We'll stay tuned to Bridge 99 Jamaica. Don't wanna leave, we'll stay tuned. Bridge 99 Jamaica.
The people's champion. Our mission is love.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We're discussing the government's proposal to have a 20-year mandatory minimum sentence served for minors ages 14 who are convicted of murder. Just to clarify for the listeners who may be listening in, or who are listening in rather, that children who are ages 12 to 14 years, they can serve a maximum sentence of 25 years depending on the offense that was committed. So it's on that basis that the mandatory minimum sentence was not applied for that particular age group. And thankfully, the government did not go that route at all. So we are grateful for even small mercies when you see them happening during the legislative making process. All right, so we are also joined now by Mr. Churchill Nito. Welcome, Mr. Nito.
Welcome to you. Hello.
Yes. Hello. Thank you so much. What is your immediate reaction to the government's proposal?
I'm against it. I think that mandatory sentences, I do not subscribe to them. I think they are draconian severity, especially for young people who during those teenage years especially tend to be subjected to adverse influences by adults and leaders in the community, what is commonly described as done, and they get involved in crimes. My own experience suggests that many young people that I have met and I have defended over the years who have heard, right, become very useful and productive citizens by virtue of counsel. And sometimes a realization that their lives, they have talent and skill and can develop their lives into something that is productive. It is of unmitigated severity, and what you do is destroying a young person who could recover from that particular incident and become, as I say, a productive citizen. I remember one experience comes to my mind. There was a boy at Kingston College who I sort of mentored. That is my alma mater.
Yes.
Right? And this young man, won a scholarship, a government scholarship, and went to, and is now a doctor, doing very well. Very bright young man. And he told me, he said that he was going home one day on a bus and realized that he was wasting his talents. I said, but no, I must do something better than this. He went to school, went back to school, started to apply himself assiduously. The first exam he took, he got 95 or 96 in chemistry. The next one, he got 94. They moved him in the bright class, in the class at KC, where all of those boys get 10 and 11 subjects in the CSEC, right? And this turned his life around. He goes from Majestic from the inner city, and he said that he was subjected to the influences there, right, initially. And now he graduated with distinction from university as a doctor. And there are many instances of that. What we need to do is to give young people a chance. There might be situations where incarceration of some sort is appropriate, but not a mandatory 20 years. We have to consider the circumstances. We have to consider the antecedents of the child. We have to consider the child's potential. A lot of these boys are bright boys who have 6 and 7 and 8 subjects, right?
And I'm happy you said it, because while the legislation is not gender specific, we know that the realities of what is happening in the communities mean that it is our young boys that more than likely will be subjected to it. To bring in Charlene, before we went on the break, Charlene, you mentioned the best interest of the child. And it was just touched on by our other guest, who noted the possibility of rehabilitation, reform. Charlene, from UNICEF's perspective, if you could just explain to our listeners, what do we mean by the best interest of the child, and what would you propose within the context of rehabilitation as well?
Yes, thank you. So I agree with everything that Mr. Turtilnita said. I mean, he's really captured it. I think that we have to find the balance between, ensuring that we are looking at the specific circumstances of a case, that we are always keeping in mind the child's best interest, and balancing that with, the need for justice for the victims. I mean, I think that we have to recognize children's greater rehabilitative potential, which is what Mr. Nita was talking about. That, children, these harsh punishments are not actually going to really support the best interests of the child, and also not going to ensure public safety in the way that we want it to. And so we need to do this through rehabilitation and not punishment. And also sort of addressing, as Mr. Nita was saying, there are all of these influences, there are issues of adolescent development that we need to look at, but also just how are we addressing the root causes and all the risk factors that may have led a child into this position. And I think we have to weigh all of those things. And we know already that these harsh punishments and long-term imprisonment, it really does not serve the best interest of the child nor the society. So I think we really need to look at that very seriously.
Okay, so hearing that perspective and hearing the concerns that we're trying to address, does the DPP's proposal to have the sentence only apply to those who commit a capital murder offense help to gain that middle ground, or is it that even in that circumstance it is an unreasonable proposal? And I ask that to Mr. Nita first, and then to you as well, Charlene.
I think, let me tell you, right? When a young person goes to prison, right, he goes into, I think it was the great Oscar Wilde who said his objection to prison is not that it breaks someone's heart, it turns someone's heart to stone. He goes to a university of crime. He's subject to conditions that are absolutely repulsive. Right? There's no rehabilitation. The young people are locked up on 4 o'clock in the evening in a cell with 6 and 7 and 8 people with one bucket with death and jails, which represents what they have to do to respond to the youth, to respond to the calls of nature. Right? They're not the cause of nature. They are subject to predators, sexual and bullying and so on. You destroy a child. I have had no young people who have gone to prison for many years. And when they go to prison young, and when they come out, they are hardened. They are more bitter and determined. They are a greater menace to society because of the treatment that they are subjected to. On the other hand, I would just like to mention, I have been involved in counseling at Kingston College for a long time. And they are young boys. I remember one day when we were celebrating the 6th grade Manning Cup when I was at school. And this young man came to me and said, Mr. Anita, I want to thank you. I'm from Waterhouse. Right? And everybody, all my friends, he said, you came and spoke to us, and I followed your advice, and I'm doing well, I'm working, and so on. Everybody, all my friends are either dead or in prison, right? So it means that these young people who are vulnerable to influences can good guidance and rehabilitation.
But Mr. Nita, to the DPP's point, which JFJ disagrees with strongly. Let me put that on record. What she's saying is that the capital offenses would suggest that these offenders, these youth offenders, these minors, are already committing the most vile of acts, the most offensive of acts. So in that regard, her estimation is that, we are protecting society from these youngsters. So I'm not sure if you have a position on whether or not that difference.
You protect society from that person committing an offense for a number of years from that person. You understand? But what we need to do is to have, not only we need to have social reform, we need to have more counseling, more guidance in school. We need to have people who can impart their wisdom. I've done it at Boys Town with children who were going the wrong way. And I let you see them play cricket for Jamaica and do other things and so on. We need to have that. We need to try and prevent those children from going along. The thing about it is that, you see, when it comes to the death penalty, the law stipulates there are certain conditions under which the death penalty can apply. You understand? Certain conditions under which the death penalty can apply. I think that you must not take away the discretion from the judge. Right? The judge, you must not listen.
And just to clarify for the listeners, Mr. Nita, before you continue, based on the Child Care and Protection Act, the death penalty cannot be imposed on a child, but that child could certainly be subjected to life imprisonment. So just to make that clarification. But hold that thought for us, Mr. Nita and Charlene. We're going to take the break, and then we continue the discussion on whether or not the DPP's proposal hold merit, or does it still undermine the principles of the Child Care and Protection Act and certainly the international laws that seek to protect minors. We take the break.
The new crispy barbecue zinger from KFC. Get ready for a whole new level of flavor. KFC, it's finger licking good. The time by KFC is
1:30.
Montego Bay, Jamaica. Caribbean Airlines and Downtown Entertainment present Reggae Sumfest 2023 at the Catherine Hall Entertainment Center with a massive injection of 90s dancehall. On Friday, July 21, don't miss the Boombox segment featuring Harry Toddler, General B, Nitty Kutchi, Tony Curtis, Dixie King, Silver Cat, and Mega Banter. Get more dancehall energy on Saturday, July 22 in the historic tribute to King Jammy featuring Admiral Bailey, Shaka Demus, Leroy Gibbons, Lieutenant Stitchy, Pictures, Bunny General, Chuck Turner, and Asa Lineage. Don't miss the 30th anniversary of Reggae Sumfest. Get your general and VIP tickets at reggaesumfest.com. Reggae Sumfest 2023, sponsored by Sunshine Snacks, Pepsi, TEF, Half Moon, Regency Blinds, Prime Trust, Sandals, Round Hill, Sea Garden, Deja, Brown Box, and Centurion.
Importers. Shipments requiring you to pay customs duties and taxes are cleared on a customs goods declaration, known as an IM4 or IMS4. Ask your clearing agent to provide your customs declaration, customs assessment notice, and customs receipt once duties and taxes are paid. Where your clearing agent may not be able to provide the IM4 or IMS4, request your customs goods declaration registration number or C number, which can be used to verify your payments. Importers, request your IM4, IMS4, or C number. It is your right. For details, email the Jamaica Customs Agency at public.relations@jca.gov.jm. Jamaica Customs, keeping our customers in focus.
KFC, take it up a notch with the new Zinger. It's got the taste and the flavor, irresistible. Zinger so deliciously, it's on a new level. Crispy barbecue Zinger, love the onion, crisp with the cheddar.
The new crispy barbecue Zinger. Delicious Kentucky fried chicken, bacon, cheddar cheese, crispy onions with smoky barbecue sauce, and a brioche bun. Available for a limited time. The new crispy barbecue Zinger. Get ready for a whole new level of flavor. KFC, it's finger-licking good.
You're now in tune to
The Bridge 99 FM
from Jamaica
to the world. Right.
The people's champion.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We are discussing today the proposals to apply a 20-year mandatory sentence to juvenile offenders 14 years and above. I wanted to pick up with you, Charlene. What is UNICEF's position on the DPP's proposal for it to apply only in capital offences? Is that viable for UNICEF or no?
And just to indicate, in addition to DPP's position or proposal, there was another that indicated that it ought to be applied only to repeat offenders.
Yes, that was Jambar's proposal. Yes. So you can speak on both, Charlene, from UNICEF's perspective.
Okay, well, thank you. So UNICEF's perspective is essentially that in every case, we would want it to be left up to the judge's discretion to look at all the facts of the case and, of course, to take into consideration the fact that this is a child. I think that based on that, for us, whether it is only capital murders or repeat offenders, I mean, we would not be in support of that because already Jamaica has one of the harshest child justice systems that, globally. And I don't think we are looking into it, but we would need more evidence to see that judges are somehow being lenient in cases that really would require some, incarceration of a young person. So we're not saying that that there would never be the case that, you may need to have some imprisonment. But again, we need to focus on rehabilitation. We need to look at the facts of the case, and we need to leave it to the judge's discretion to look at all of those things, all of the risk factors. Mr. Nita mentioned that very often the young people involved in these cases have been coerced by adults and so forth. And so I think there's a lot that needs to be considered when sentencing. And as I said already, I don't know if we have the evidence to say that judges really have been very lenient in some of those cases. I think they know when, there needs to be a particular type of sentence. And then again, as we said, we would be pushing for, of course, serious investment in rehabilitation for those young people. And so I think that's essentially our position.
Just to add to that, Charlene, I have so many other questions, when you look at the fact that the Firearm Act, for example, is here with a 15-year mandatory minimum sentence already. When you talk about the only provision I know in law, and I can stand correction, Jade, Mr. Nito, is the anti-gang legislation, which basically sees as an aggravating factor, wherein those who influence a child negatively forces that child into a gang, for example, they will see greater years being served if they're so convicted. What is troubling for me, I don't recall any other legislation that has such similar provision, whether it is laws around human trafficking or so on. So that is something that JFJ certainly would be pushing. But to go back to the point that you mentioned, Charlene, greater efforts around rehabilitation resources. Looking at the DCS, the Department of Correctional Services reports, INDECOM's 2018 reports, and the injustice that we see happening in the Rio Cobre, what are the proposals for rehabilitation and the resources? What do you really see happening there that UNICEF would say, 1, 2, 3, this is what the government ought to do?
Okay, well, I first want to start out by saying that I think that the DCS has actually been making some strides. They have been looking at really assessing a child's needs when they come in and trying to find a path to rehabilitation, an individualized path to rehabilitation for that child. I know that they're also making a lot of strides in terms of creating a more positive environment for children in juvenile correctional facilities, which I think all can be commended. And I think the Ministry of Justice also can be commended for some of the work that they have been doing in terms of child diversion, for example, and restorative justice and victim support. But of course, much more can be done. And it is challenging, don't get me wrong. But I think if we were to identify some things that we need to do, what international evidence and research has been showing and telling us is that really that individualized approach and trying to tackle the risk factors of individual children are extremely important and also very successful. That if you can look at all the factors that led a particular child to this position and focus on trying to give them the right interventions. So we're talking about proper health care, education, deep therapy,
social workers,
exactly, all of these things. And people say they're expensive, but to be honest, the research also shows it's less expensive than having long, lengthy imprisonment.
And it's all you weigh the social cost as well. It's all you weigh the social cost,
Of course. So we have to look at all these things.
Yes.
I agree with you entirely. I just want to make a point.
Yes.
Mandatory sentences are not new,
Not at all.
Right? We always remember after the riots in Montego Bay there, the riots, the Rasta riots, right? The government of the day imposed a minimum sentence of 18 months for possession of ganja and 3 years on second or subsequent conviction. People who were allegedly found with 1 stick of ganja went to prison for 18 months, including tooth. You understand?
Yes.
And what it did do is that police officers wanting to get at somebody would allege that they found a 1 spliff in their pocket,
Yes.
Right? Okay. Then there was apparently a series of racial taking place among middle class people at one time, and the government of the day then introduced a 7-year minimum and lashes for rape. And let me tell you something, there is nothing more demoralizing, more dehumanizing, folks, and the lashes. You understand? People are getting 7, 6, and 7 years. I must say that Carl Ratchford, former president of the Court of Appeal, told me that he was, one of the things that he was very proud about during his tenure, that he got rid of those lashes. It was also 5 years minimum for robbery aggravation and lashes.
So hold on,
Then you had
Mr.
the
Churchill
gun-
Nito, as you're talking about the historical context of having these mandatory sentences, in some other jurisdictions, they have reconstructed their mandatory sentencing to include a little judicial discretion line. So it would say the judge can depart from this in certain circumstances or in
UK,
special
South
circumstances.
Africa, several.
Yeah, so what do you think about that construction being applied here? Or
What I'm saying is that it goes back to the point you're making. I want to make my position fellowshiply clear, right? That there are offences that require, that merit probably the imposition of strong sentences,
Absolutely.
Yeah, they are so. I'm not saying that it should be and pat them, a little pat on there and say go. I'm not saying that. There are certain circumstances the judge should have the capacity, the ability to decide if a boy's history is that he's been involved in a lot of crime despite efforts of all like that, and if it's a particular heinous crime, then you can do that, but give the magistrate or the judge the opportunity to do so. And my experience has been that judges, which is considerable, a lot of these judges impose appropriate sentences. They don't come and give lenient sentences. There was also the gun court legislation of 1973 and 74.
Yes.
Remember? With the indefinite detention, it don't matter whether you're 12,
A significant
13,
injustice to this country, yeah.
Yes, 11, 12, 13, 14, it don't really matter. And I'll tell you, and then they changed it to life imprisonment, right? And I had an experience with a man, right, who got a life sentence, and he came out after 10 or 12 years on parole, and he offended again. Right, but his parole had not yet, the period of his parole had not yet expired. Right? So what happened is that when the judge found him guilty of this offense for robbery, the judge, according to law, if you break your parole, you're going to go back to prison under the sentence. Yes. Right? And he was then sentenced to 12 years for offense and sentenced to the life sentence, which had then been abolished. It was a prisoner, a woman who had represented when I just started practicing and who had been in prison for some while after for some offences, who brought him to me. And I had to do a petition to the Governor General. The man had served the sentence and had served 10 years of the life imprisonment, and I petitioned the Governor General and Council and got the sentence submitted, and he was freed. That's because the law is not there as a monster. The law must have compassion, humanity, consideration. The law must think of people who, when they offend, if there's a chance that they can make good of their lives. I cherish the memories of young people calling me when I represent them and they're acquitted and saying, Mr. Nita, thank you for my life. You understand? And when I hear there are accountants abroad, when I get gifts and so on from your appreciation, we must give them a chance. There are some people who are beyond redemption. I concede. Right? And then you give them the appropriate sentence. But there's a tendency that whenever a particular administrative government, whether it be PNP or JLP, but they can't control the crime, they appease a dissatisfied, a restless public by the imposition of these draconian sentences to say, see what I'm doing. I'm tough on crime. I'm fighting crime.
So in 2023, we're back where we were in 2010. I believe when we were reviewing the anti-crime bills at the time, which interestingly enough, the Bail Act is currently under review. I'm Charlene, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm not sure if UNICEF has any position on the bail bill, because it does have implications for children, or if that is something that UNICEF perhaps would need to review a little bit more in terms of how minors are dealt with when they come in conflict with the law and bail application is dealt with and so on.
Well, I wouldn't be able to comment on that today, Mikhail, but what I can tell you is that we are really taking a serious look at the whole child justice system here in Jamaica. And we are hoping to really work with the government, with civil society, with everyone to really ensure that we have a child justice system which is in line with the Convention on the Rights of the Child, other international guidelines, and just that reflect the realities of our society as well. But again, putting the best interests of the child at the heart of everything that we're doing. And so as a part of that, we'll be looking at other legislation, including the Bail Act and other things, including the sort of age of criminal responsibility. There are many things that we want to look at. So stay tuned. We should definitely have some recommendations and some work in that area coming up very soon.
Okay, thank you so much.
Can I speak another point?
Please, we're just going to be asking for last word from both of you.
Yes.
So this is your last word, Mr. Nita?
Yes. Okay, fine. And I thank you for the opportunity of expressing my views publicly. I feel strongly about it.
Yes.
If some of the people are advocating these draconian sentences were to go to prison, go to GP, even to halfway tree, right? I remember Michael Mann in 1972 described it as the black hole of Calcutta, where there are 12 and 13 people in one cell, right? And see those conditions under which those people live. And I remember when they used to keep the prisoners at the gun court, they used to talk to me. I used to carry stuff and give them, right? Gears, sports gears and so on. Because I'm saying they have nothing to do. But they are subject, and I'll also repeat this one case before I go, right? Because it was stuck in my mind. There was a man I had defended sometime, a long time ago, probably before you were born. And this man was in prison for 10 years, 12 years. After a while, he became an orderly, right? An orderly. He got a red band. That means that he had a little bit more, privileges. And he said that while he was there, they brought in a young boy, right? And they took the young boy and put him in a cell with some well-known, hardened homosexuals who had been serving some really hard time, life sentence, big sentences. And he said he licked out, he was experiencing, he said he licked out against it, and then take the boy out of the cell. When I go into bed, them take him, the water, take him and put him back in the cell. The following morning, they had to get an ambulance to take that boy out. He's a young boy, to take him out, to take him to hospital. Those are the things that young people are subject to, right? And they go there, they have no resources, they have no friends and so on. When a man is
what was the age group, Mr. Nita?
He was about 16 or so at the time.
And I just want to point out before we end is that the law still makes provision or allowance for children to be incarcerated with adults, which is something I'm sure UNICEF, but certainly JFJ, we have been advocating ought not to be provided for, which is why, you can't pass strong laws without making some provision in terms of institutional resources and so on to house persons who are being incarcerated, especially our youngsters.
Yeah, listen, there's one more part before indulge me.
I give you now 1 minute, Mr. Nito.
All right, 1 minute, okay. 1 minute is a long time for me at my age, right? Anyhow, I was advised by the headmaster at Casey that there were some boys that were, looking a little bit suspect in their behavior, wanted to And I went down there and I took with me 2 men who had been convicted for murder and sentenced to hang. And so one of them was absolutely innocent, right? And that's what it eventually established. But that days for hanging was set for both of them, right? And Pratt and Morgan saved them, right?
Oh, okay.
And they spoke to the assembly, the Chapel's Field, right? And told them of their experiences in prison, right? Graphic and tell them in prison and tell what happened. And one of them said, listen, my problem is that in 1957, my mother died in the plane crash, Kendall plane crash, train crash, right? And I was left on the street and I started to hang out with them and get involved in a gang and so on. And they were convicted for a number of robberies. At that time, there was no provision for legal aid for robbery with aggravation. There was just a few offenses. The one were going to again. And he got 14 years. And you know, and then he was convicted for murder. You know what he said? He said, if I had an opportunity, I would have gone to KC. I'd be alongside Mr. Nita, I'd be a barrister at law. And what struck me is how those boys listened. And after when I was leaving, they surrounded him, the both of them, and asked them questions and so on. Right? And when they were, we can save our youngsters, we need to. They are of future. I don't care what it is. We cannot go on this thing because what you are destroying. And what you do is you make other people who see this happen, relatives and friends, lose confidence in the system.
Yes.
That's a
We're going to have to leave it there, Mr. Nito. I have to leave it there. Charlene, last word from you?
Well, I think, UNICEF really is calling on the government to reconsider this proposed mandatory minimum sentences for children. We really feel that this rigid approach that is going to remove judicial discretion and individualized sentences will not actually contribute to public health. And not only that, public safety.
Yes.
But not only that, it's going to impede the development and successful reintegration into society of these young people. So instead, we're recommending that as a country, we continue to invest in a strong differentiated child justice system, which is in line, of course, with international standards, which has a focus on violence prevention, restorative justice, and rehabilitation. And this will have a more significant long-term impact on community safety. But we also think we need to tackle the root causes, right? So we're not continuously just dealing with the symptoms of a problem.
Yes.
So that means that we need to improve our investment and the conditions for children in terms and families in terms of access to quality early childhood development, education, health, and self-care and social protection. And we really feel that that is the way to go, and we stand ready to support and help the country in that regard.
Thank you so much to you both. We really appreciate you taking the time. You were with us almost for an hour. So again, greatly appreciated.
Time passes so rapidly when you're having fun.
Yes, I appreciate the views. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That you have derived some benefit from what we have said.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
We are past the breaks. I think we may just end. Okay, the producer has given us the go-ahead.
Yes.
But just to continue with the discussion, just to summarize a little bit, and, we had the conversation about the PEP, for example, and you see parents up in arms about which schools children are passing for, and it really brings to light the inequity in the system and why the government, as you've been articulating, Jade and others, and certainly said by both our guests, that we need to fix the root causes of crime.
Yes. We have taken a reactionary approach, and I'm glad Mr. Churchill Nita was able to give us a bit of history as well to show that this is not the first time that we've thought in this exact manner, and it clearly did not lead to a long-term solution because we're here again.
And the government can't keep bemoaning. It's expensive. Again, we have to weigh the cost. Today, it may cost us a couple millions, billions of dollars.
Yes.
But what is it costing us in the long term? We're a small island, but as Jamaicans, we say we're little but we're taller. But at the same time, we have to put the investment in. Wherein I go back to the point, parents were stressed because of PEP. But perhaps if we had a zoning system, for example, wherein if I live in a particular community, I'm assured that my child can pass to what Jamaicans call good school. And all schools can be equipped with good teachers if we put the resources there.
Yes.
Where we empower our children. We are within the context of constitutional reform now. Should we be constitutionally providing for children to get education as a right? At the very least, up to secondary, but I believe personally up to tertiary.
Yes.
Parents, government, a little bit more is needed for greater protection. And I would want to say to the government of Jamaica that the Child Care and Protection Act can't have so many provisions in it. For example, Section 24 that keeps criminalizing our children.
Yes.
An act with such a name must focus on ensuring that there are greater protection and care provisions for our children. I just want to reiterate JFJ's point, and we look forward to making our presentation before the Joint Select Committee on our own submission that was made last week, Wednesday.
Yes, or Tuesday, actually, I think it was.
You got permission for a day's extension. And thanks again to the Select Committee for allowing us that single day provision and extension rather. And I hope that our recommendations are fruitful and useful as they deliberate.
Well, I'm pleased to know that some of our recommendations, for example, at least one we can talk about is that we also asked for it not to apply to children generally.
Yes.
And I'm glad to hear that recommendation being echoed by other parties.
Yes.
So it's not so far-fetched.
Yes, and similarly, we don't necessarily share some of what was said, but similarly, we do have, a second option that the Joint Select Committee can consider. So again, we look forward to those being applied. All right.
So thank you so much for joining us this week. This was Let's Talk Justice. I'm Jade Williams, Policy and Advocacy
trivia
Specialist at Jamaicans for Justice. Yes. Our trivia winner was Confident Palmer. So
again?
Yes.
Bright supporter.
The lady knows her her current affairs.
Yes, clearly.
So we will reach out to you with your prize as usual. So congratulations for that.
Again, I'm Michael Jackson. Thank you so much for joining us, and see you next week.
Justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or Jamaicans4Justice.org.
The people's champion.
Don't wanna leave, don't wanna go. We'll stay tuned to Bridge 99 Jamaica. Don't wanna leave, we'll stay tuned. Bridge 99 Jamaica.
Hi, I'm Ronald Thwaites, and I'm the host of The Public Eye and The Open Mind on the Bridge 99 and Irie Jam in the tri-state area. This program will tell you the truth